Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. I'm Ty Glenn. Hope you guys are having a great day. It is currently 11:15 p.m. I am recording this episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. So it's late night for me. It's almost, well, I wouldn't say almost midnight because, like I said, I am recording this at 11:15 p.m. But about 45 minutes till midnight for me, but for you guys, it's a Friday for you. So yeah, kind of getting this episode late at night on a Thursday at 11:15 p.m. So yeah, before we go ahead and get started, make sure that you are following the Hockey Talk with TG podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Got a lot of NHL news to discuss in the Hockey Talk on this episode of Hockey Talk with TG podcast, such as the Washington Capitals clinching the playoffs, which Canadian team is most likely to win the Stanley Cup. All that and more on this episode of Hockey Talk TG podcast, plus recap of the NHL General Manager Meetings that were in Florida. So make sure that you stay tuned into this episode until the end. But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. So the Washington Capitals, they hold on for the 3-2 win over the Philadelphia Flyers on Thursday, and they become the first team to clinch a playoff berth in the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs. They're also the first team to reach 100 points, and they moved to 46, 15, and 8 of the season. They sweep the season series against the Flyers 4-0. And they won 8 of their last 9 games. And we did see Alex Ovechkin score career goal number 888. So the Great 8 gets number 888. And he is 7 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time NHL record. He has 35 goals this season. He possibly might hit 900 goals this season before the year is over with. If not, it could happen in the 2025-26 season. He will be a UFA after that season, though. So after the 2025-26 season, he'll be a UFA. He signed to a 5-year, $9.5 million contract deal with the Washington Capitals, according to Puckpedia. And other goal scorers for the Washington Capitals in this game against Philly were Brandon Duhaime and Andrew Mangiapane. Charlie Lindgren, he had a great game. He stopped 27 of 28 shots faced in net. And for the Flyers, Ryan Poehling and Sean Couturier scored for Philadelphia, and Samuel Ersson made 13 saves on 18 shots faced in net. And the Flyers, it has been a slump. They have lost 3 straight games, 2-8-0 in their last 10, and they moved to 28, 34, and 8 of the season. They continue their 5-game road trip in Dallas against the Stars Saturday. It's actually a back-to-back set for Philly, as they'll face the Blackhawks on Sunday, which Dallas, they're most likely to lose, but for the Blackhawks, the Flyers will most likely take the win and sweep the season series, because the Flyers and Blackhawks have met before this season. I think it was back in either, I want to say November, December. It probably might be November. And Matvei Michkov, he had the game-winning goal in the Flyers' last game against the Chicago Blackhawks. It could be the same time around, or just the Flyers win in general. The Blackhawks have lost 6 straight games, by the way, following their 3-1 loss to the LA Kings on Thursday. But yeah, that's what's next for the Flyers on their schedule. The Capitals, on the other hand, they conclude their 3-game homestand against the Florida Panthers Saturday at 4:00 p.m. Central Time. And also could be a potential Eastern Conference final matchup between the Washington Capitals and Florida Panthers. Well, let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. Do you think the Capitals and Panthers could go at it in the Eastern Conference final? Okay, now we're going to talk about does the Canadian team have a shot at winning the Stanley Cup this year. So 5 Canadian teams are currently in playoff spots, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators, Winnipeg Jets, Montreal Canadiens, and not Vancouver, because they lost 4-3 in overtime to the St. Louis Blues. I think the Blues still have that second wild card spot. So it's the Maple Leafs, the Senators, the Canadiens, the Jets, and I want to say the Canucks. I don't think it's the Canucks, though, but those are the 5 Canadian teams. Oh, yeah, and Edmonton Oilers. So just, I had to think about this, guys. Sorry for thinking so long. I had to think about this. So 5 teams currently in Canadian playoff spots. It is the Maple Leafs, the Senators, the Oilers, the Jets, and the Canadiens. I had to think this over a bit, so apologize for that. But the Canucks and Flames are still chasing a wild card playoff spot in the Western Conference. And the last time a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup, and I'm pretty sure you guys all know this, was 1993. So it has been 32 years since the Canadian team has won a Stanley Cup. And as an American, I want it to happen. I really do want it to happen. Before this season had started, I predicted that the Edmonton Oilers will win the Stanley Cup and get it done. They will break that Canadian Stanley Cup drought. That's what I said before the season started. You didn't watch my season predictions video for the 2024-25 NHL season. I think I did a video on that on the TG Hockey channel, or I might have done an episode of that on my Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Either or, I had said the Edmonton Oilers were going to win the Stanley Cup this year. I don't know if that is still going to be the case, but we'll just have to see what happens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And recent final appearances for Canadian teams in general. Of course, the Edmonton Oilers, the last Canadian team to reach the Stanley Cup Finals in last year's Stanley Cup Final matchup against the Florida Panthers. Of course, the Montreal Canadiens, they were there in 2021. The Vancouver Canucks, I'm pretty sure you guys all know this, especially if you're a Canucks fan. You guys made it to the Stanley Cup Final in 2011. And then that's when you had the riot afterwards in Vancouver after the Boston Bruins won the Stanley Cup. And then the Ottawa Senators, they made it there in 2007. Edmonton Oilers made it there in 2006. Calgary Flames, they made it there in 2004. Vancouver Canucks made it in 1994. So ever since then, it's just been terrible for Canadian teams. They just seem to not get it done. And we all thought the Edmonton Oilers were going to get it done in the Stanley Cup Final last season. But the Florida Panthers, they were the better team. I mean, I kind of knew the Florida Panthers were going to win the Stanley Cup last season. I predicted that they would win the Stanley Cup last season in the Stanley Cup Final matchup. And they did. I mean, Sam Reinhart got the game-winning goal in that game, and the Canadian Stanley Cup drought continues. But I'm hoping for this year a Canadian team can get it done. I mean, you won the Four Nations. At least bring home a cup to Canada. As an American, I'm rooting for a Canadian team to get it done because I would love to see a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup. And I really think it's got to be the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, Connor McDavid, he deserves a Stanley Cup. I believe he's going to get a Stanley Cup. I believe this is the year that Connor McDavid will get a Stanley Cup. Edmonton Oilers probably most likely to play the LA Kings in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the 4th straight time. And we all know the Oilers are going to win that series after winning the first 3 playoff meetings between the two teams. So, yeah, I really think the Edmonton Oilers will be the Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup and to end the Canadian Cup drought. But let me know what you guys think about that down in the comments. Do you agree with my pick that the Edmonton Oilers will be the Canadian team to get it done and go all the way? Or do you think it'll be somebody else? Either way, just let me know down in the comments. You don't have to agree with my answer. If it's a disagreement, you think my answers are dumb, just put it down in the comments, but tell me why you thought my answer was dumb, and then I'll try and respond back best way I can, just for an engaging conversation. I don't think you can comment on Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio, so it'll just have to be Spotify and YouTube that you can leave comments for me down on. Alright, so this was announced on, I think, Wednesday, I believe. It will be the Pittsburgh Penguins and Nashville Predators going at it in the NHL Global Series in Stockholm, Sweden for the 2025-26 NHL season. The games will be played on November 14th and November 16th at Avicii Arena in Stockholm, Sweden. And when I first started this matchup, I thought back to 2017, where these two teams went at it in the Stanley Cup Final, and the Pittsburgh Penguins beat the Nashville Predators that year to win their second straight Stanley Cup. And, I actually feel bad for the Nashville Predators, despite them sweeping the Blackhawks in order to get to the Stanley Cup Final. I felt like they could have at least won a Stanley Cup. So I actually kind of feel bad for them. And I actually kind of don't feel bad for them. So it's kind of bittersweet right there when they lost in the Stanley Cup Final to the Pittsburgh Penguins. I feel bad for them because I wanted to see Nashville with the Stanley Cup. They came into the league in 1997, 1998. And, of course, Barry Trotz was the team's first head coach. Andrew Burnett scored the first goal in the Predators team history. And I don't know who was their general manager at the time. It was probably David Poile, because he's been general manager of the Nashville Predators for a long time now. But Barry Trotz is currently taking over as GM. But I'm just saying in general that I felt bad for the Predators because they haven't won the Stanley Cup. And that was their first year on making it to the Stanley Cup Final. And, they didn't get the job done. And then I don't feel bad for it because they swept my Chicago Blackhawks in order to reach the Stanley Cup Final, and also get to see Sidney Crosby hoist his third Stanley Cup. In 2009, he was the youngest captain to win the Stanley Cup. So already had a career for Sidney Crosby. But anyway, this will be the Penguins' first European return since the 2008-2009 NHL Premier Series in Stockholm, Sweden. And excuse me for that hiccup. And the Predators, they had played in Global Series games before, such as the one in Prague and in Berlin. I think they played against San Jose in the Global Series at one point. I was doing the 2022, I want to say 2022-23 season right there. And of course, Philip Forsberg will be coming home to his country of Sweden for the Nashville Predators, so he'll be a Swedish standout star for the Nashville Predators. And as for the Pittsburgh Penguins, if he stays with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Erik Karlsson will be coming home to his country of Sweden to play in front of his home crowd for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So Erik Karlsson and Philip Forsberg will be the standout Swedish players in this global series between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Nashville Predators. And of course, all of this is just to grow the game of hockey. Four Nations certainly grew the game of hockey. You even have people who don't like hockey tuning in to the event, and I can't wait to see what the NHL does with the Olympics next season. There was some talk about NHL continuing the All-Star game and then them just, going with the Olympics, which I'll get into that in a second. But I really think that these global series can also be another factor into growing the greatest sport and game in the world that we all know today, hockey. So I'm really glad that the NHL is doing this. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that, and that's my analysis on the Pittsburgh Penguins and Nashville Predators Global Series. You're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan or Nashville Predators fan. Let me know how you're feeling about this. Pretty sure you're excited for the event, but you're not excited about the matchup considering the Penguins beat you guys in 2017. That was my first reaction when I saw this Global Series matchup, Penguins and Predators, and I thought back to the 2017 Stanley Cup Final. Okay, so another news that came out this year, or I think this was on Wednesday as well. The 2025-26 NHL season will start on October 7th, 2005. So that's when the NHL season will start, and then the end of it will probably be in like early April of 2026. So, and of course, the NHL will also have their NHL Olympics for the first time since the 2013-14 NHL season, and this will be in Milan, Italy. And of course, they're also going to be having a NHL All-Star game in Long Island, and that's where it kind of gets confusing. Like, should the NHL continue with All-Star games, or should they just continue with Four Nations? Like I said before on the Hockey Talk with TG podcast, as you've been listening, I really think the NHL should do these Four Nations tournaments instead of the All-Star game. I enjoy the All-Star games. Don't get me wrong. I do enjoy the All-Star games, but I'm speaking for all hockey fans in general when I say the NHL should just do Four Nations and Olympics and best on best international tournaments instead of All-Star games, because like Gary Bettman said, it raised the bar and it grew the game of hockey. I even had like some non-hockey friends tuning in to the event, and they were happy about the event despite the outcome of Team Canada winning against Team USA. I'm pretty sure all my fellow Canadians up north are happy about that, but my fellow Americans are not happy about that. So, despite the outcome, Team Canada got it done. But also, I felt like it was a great tournament overall. And, of course, you'll have the NHL Winter Classic between the Panthers and the Rangers. And then you'll have the Stadium Series between the Bruins and Lightning. And then the Global Series, like I said, will start in November between the Penguins and Predators. So already starting to feel good about this 2025-2026 NHL season. And just to, like I said, piggyback on that topic about whether we'll see the NHL do All-Star games or we'll just be best on best international tournaments from here on out. Like Gary Bettman said, it raised the bar, and it was certainly a fantastic event all around. They did put out a documentary about it on the NHL YouTube channel. It's called Four Nations Unveiled. Make sure you take a look at it when you get the chance. It's certainly a great documentary to watch. And the Islanders, they're supposed to be hosting the 2026 NHL All-Star Game, but it might be a change of plans. It probably won't be an All-Star Game in 2026, just like there wasn't an All-Star Game for this year because of, the NHL and the NHLPA trying to decide whether they should do All-Star games or just do best on best international tournaments. And, like I said a few minutes ago, and if you have been listening to my Hockey Talk with TG podcast, you would know that I would love to see the NHL continue to do these Four Nations tournaments, and hopefully bring in some more people that can like hockey as well. Like, usually the people who wouldn't tune into hockey, hopefully they start to become a hockey fan after that. And let me know you guys' thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think the NHL should just do best on best international tournaments or All-Star games? I feel like you guys would most likely agree with my answer, but if you don't, just let me know down in the comments. But I feel like I know what most of you will say if you do leave a comment for me down below. All right, so this happened on, I think, Tuesday, I believe. Sidney Crosby passing Wayne Gretzky for fourth most points with a single franchise against the Islanders on Tuesday, and the Penguins 4-2 loss. The Penguins are in action today against the Columbus Blue Jackets at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That will be the only game on for Friday on NHL Network for you guys to watch. It was his 1,670 career point with the Pittsburgh Penguins for Sidney Crosby. Of course, Wayne Gretzky had 1,669 points with the Edmonton Oilers, and now Sidney Crosby has the most points with a single franchise, or at least fourth most points, I should say. And of course, Sidney Crosby has played 20 years with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, he debuted with the Penguins in 2005, which during the 2005-2006 NHL season, that's when Sidney Crosby was a rookie then, and that was also Mario Lemieux's last NHL season. And of course, and speaking of Mario Lemieux, I think Sidney Crosby, at some point this season, he passed Mario Lemieux to become the Penguins' all-time assist leader with 1,034 assists. And of course, Sidney Crosby's 50th assist this season marked the 12th time he's reached the milestone. Of course, we've seen him reach the milestone a bunch of times in his career. And of course, with 73 points this season for Sidney Crosby, he is shy of his 14th 80-point season, which would probably ensure a point per game advantage in all 20 NHL seasons. That would possibly break another record of Wayne Gretzky. So it's not just Alex Ovechkin trying to break records of Wayne Gretzky's. You got his arch rival and nemesis Sidney Crosby trying to break records from Wayne Gretzky as well. And like I said, the Penguins do play today against the Columbus Blue Jackets at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. This will be on NHL Network for you guys to watch. And last meeting of the season between the Blue Jackets and Penguins, the Blue Jackets won the first two meets. They won 6-2 in Columbus on November 15th, and then they won 4-3 in the shootout on January 7th. All right, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. Really do appreciate each and every one of you that tunes in to the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. So, of course, this was just, or I should say, not a long, tight episode that we usually do or sometimes do in the Hockey Talk with TG podcast, or not up to 30 minutes. But, some news we just don't have 30 minutes to say. But it's kind of good in a way because, we keep it 30 minutes and under. That's how we normally do on the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. I try not to go over 30 minutes, though. But nonetheless, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. God first, as always. Be blessed. I'll see you guys Monday for another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Take care.